I think eating horse would be shocking to most of the world. So why is Kazakhstan any different?
Because for Kazakh people, that's the horse is everything. If you would like transportation, horse is your transportation. That's your meal. That's your drink. That's your friend. That's your everything, I can say. And also, the horse meat is much more clean than any other meats, I can say, because the horses, they don't have bile in their blood. There are less amount of cholesterol. Is that correct?
Cholesterol.
Yeah. Cholesterol.
We eat a lot of pork in the West. Like,
Yeah.
do you guys eat pork?
No, we don't.
Why is that?
Oh, because we consider that the pork is not clean animal because they eat their own child and their own. Oops, I'm so sorry. Yeah. That's fine.
Oh, interesting. Would you guys eat horse?
ஹை ஃப்ரெண்ட்ஸ், நம்ம இந்தியாவில் வேத காலத்தில் 8 விதமான கல்யாணம் இருந்திருக்கு. அந்த 8 டைப் ஆஃப் மேரேஜில் என்னென்ன மாதிரியான கல்யாணம்லாம் பண்ணாங்க, அடுத்து வரதட்சணை கொடுத்தாங்களா இல்லையா, அது ஆண் பெண்ணுக்கு கொடுத்தாங்களா இல்லை பெண் ஆணுக்கு கொடுத்தாங்களா, நம்ம எல்லாமே டீட்டெயிலாக பார்க்கலாம். இது எக்ஸாம் பாயிண்ட் ஆஃப் வியூவில் பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா மேட்ச் ஆஃப் ஃபாலோயிங், ஸ்டேட்மெண்ட் அசஷன் அதுலேயும் பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா வந்து கேட்பாங்க. ஓகே, அவங்க பார்க்கலாம். ஃபர்ஸ்ட் ஒன் பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா பிரம்மா மேரேஜ். 8 விதமான மேரேஜில் இந்த பிரம்மா மேரேஜ் தான் வந்து உயர்வான மேரேஜ் அப்படிங்காங்க. இதில் வந்து சம வகுப்பில் உள்ளவங்களை வந்து திருமணம் பண்ணுறாங்க. அதே மாதிரி மனுஸ்மிருதி வந்து இதில் ஒரு முக்கிய பங்கு வந்து வகிக்கு. ரெண்டாவது டைப் ஆஃப் மேரேஜ் பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா தெய்வா மேரேஜ். இந்த மேரேஜில் பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா பெண்களை ஒரு காலகட்டத்துக்கு அடுத்து சமய குரு இல்லை மத குரு அப்படிம்பாங்க. அவங்களுக்கு வந்து ஒரு தட்சணை மாதிரி அவங்கள தானமாக கொடுத்துருவாங்க. ஸோ பெண்களை வந்து மத குருவுக்கு தானமாக கொடுக்காங்க. இந்த திருமணத்துக்கு பேர் பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா தெய்வா மேரேஜ் அப்படிங்கிறாங்க. அடுத்த டைப் ஆஃப் மேரேஜ் பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா அர்சா மேரேஜ். இந்த அர்சா மேரேஜில் பெண்ணை வந்து ஒரு முனிவருக்கு திருமணம் பண்ணி வைப்பாங்க. அந்த முனிவர் வந்து பெண் வீட்டுக்கு வரதட்சணை கொடுப்பாரு. பசுமாடு அந்த மாதிரிலாம் வந்து வரதட்சணை கொடுப்பாரு. அடுத்த திருமணம் பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா பிரஜப்தியா. இதில் பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா வந்து ஆணும் பெண்ணுக்கு எந்த ஒரு வரதட்சணையும் கொடுக்க மாட்டாங்க, பெண்ணும் ஆணுக்கு எந்த ஒரு வரதட்சணையும் கொடுக்க மாட்டாங்க. ஸோ வந்து நோ டவுரி, ரெண்டு சைடும் பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா எந்த ஒரு எதிர்பார்ப்பும் இல்லாமல் திருமணம் பண்ணுவாங்க. இதான் வந்து பிரஜப்தியா திருமணம் அப்படிங்கிறது. அடுத்தது பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா கந்தர்வ திருமணம். இந்த காலத்தில் பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா உலகம் எவ்வளோ முன்னேறிட்டு நிறைய பகுத்தறிவு வந்துட்டு நம்ம இந்த மாதிரிலாம் நிறைய சொல்கிறோம். ஆனால் இப்போவும் பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா வந்து காதல் திருமணத்திற்கு நிறைய பேர் வந்து எதிர்க்காங்க. ஆனால் அந்த காலத்திலே பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா லவ் மேரேஜ் இருந்திருக்கு. அந்த லவ் மேரேஜாக வந்து இந்த கந்தர்வ திருமணம் அப்படிங்காங்க. ஸோ காதல் திருமணம் தான் இந்த கந்தர்வ திருமணம் அப்படிங்கிறது. அடுத்த திருமணம் பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா அசுரா திருமணம். இந்த திருமணத்தில் பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா பெண்ணோட அப்பாவுக்கு காசு பணம்லாம் கொடுத்து அந்த பெண்ணை வந்து வாங்குவாங்க. ஸோ அந்த திருமணம் தான் பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா அசுரா திருமணம் அப்படிங்கிறது. ஸோ வந்து ஆண்மகன் வந்து பெண்ணோட அப்பாவுக்கு காசு பணம் கொடுத்து அவரோட பொண்ணை வந்து வாங்கி திருமணம் பண்ணுவார். இது வந்து அசுர திருமணம் அப்படிம்பாங்க. அடுத்து பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா ரக்ஷசா திருமணம். இது என்ன அப்படின்னா சண்டை போட்டு போர் புரிகிற மாதிரி போர் புரிஞ்சு அந்த பெண்ணை வந்து கைப்பற்றிட்டு வருவாங்க. ஸோ இதான் வந்து ரக்ஷசா திருமணம் அப்படிங்கிறது. ஸோ ஒரு சண்டை போட்டு ஒரு போர் முயற்சி ஒரு வன்முறை மூலமாக ஒரு பெண்ணை வந்து கைப்பற்றி வந்து திருமணம் பண்ணுறாங்க. ஸோ இது வந்து ரக்ஷச திருமணம். அடுத்தது பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா பைசாசா திருமணம். இதில் பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா வந்து பெண்ணை வந்து மயக்கி கவர்ந்து திருமணம் பண்ணுவாங்க. ஓகே, ஸோ இதான் பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா வந்து 8 விதமான திருமணம். அந்த வேத காலத்தில் பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா இந்த 8 விதமான திருமணம் தான் வந்து மோஸ்ட்டாக ஃபாலோ பண்ணியிருக்காங்க. ஓகே, நம்ம அடுத்த வீடியோவில் பார்ப்போம். தேங்க்யூ.
Did you know that more than half of all the Muslim countries in the world have at one point in history been ruled by the Turks? You see, most people know the Turks as the people who live in Turkey, a country that sits right between Europe and the Middle East. Many of them have blue eyes and blonde hair, and if it weren't for the fact that they were Muslim, you could have confused them for being just another European Mediterranean nation. But in reality, the Turks come from a very far away land, as part of a bunch of countries that were once all part of the same family, somewhere in the flat, grassy deserts of Central Asia, in a place called the Great Steppe. In the 400s, the Turks were a bunch of small nomadic tribes migrating from place to place and warring with other tribes in an actually quite similar way to the Arabs before Islam. And it was around this time that the Mongols were starting to unite and pose a serious threat to the other nations in the region. And so by the 500s, Turks had packed their bags and started migrating west. Now, the thing about the Great Steppe is that it's wide, flat, and not a whole lot of people live there. So when the Turks moved west, they were able to expand into huge swaths of land with very little resistance. And eventually they consolidated their new land into the first Turkic Empire. Fast forward a couple hundred years and the Muslims have expanded out of the Arabian Peninsula. And now they're on the edge of the Turkic Empire. And at the same time, China was swallowing up land in the east and was headed right for the Muslims, and the Turks were caught in the middle. A small group of Turkish soldiers decided to join the Muslims in the Battle of Talas, an immensely important battle in the rivalry between the Muslims and the Chinese. And that's when they first heard the message of Islam. The Muslims managed to defeat the Chinese, and some of the Turks even converted after the battle. And this moment in history was the starting point for the rest of the Turks to eventually embrace Islam. A couple hundred years later, a merchant from Bukhara, which is where Imam Bukhari is from, by the way, was traveling through Central Asia to do business. He asked one of the local Turkish rulers if he could build a masjid there, since Muslims were now using the trade route a lot and they needed somewhere to pray. The ruler granted him permission and even gave him some money to build it. Eventually, the masjid was built and the Muslim caravans used to stop by and pray and rest. And one 12-year-old boy by the name of Satuq Bughra Khan saw this and became curious. He entered the masjid and saw Muslims there praying 5 times a day and began asking questions. Soon after, he decided to become Muslim himself, but he kept his Islam a secret from his family. You see, the young boy was the nephew of the ruler and he was next in line, and he did not want to jeopardize his chance to bring his people to Islam. Eventually, Satuq took the throne, becoming the first Muslim Turkish Sultan. And by the way, his capital was in Kashgar, which is one of the main cities where the Uyghurs live in China, and the Uyghurs are Muslim Turks. It's all coming together now. So in the year 934, he converted his entire empire from Tengrism to Islam. And as the Muslim traveler Ibn Fadlan put it, 200,000 tents became Muslim, which has got to be at least 500,000 people, if not more, considering each tent is a family. It was called the Karakhanid Empire, and it was the first Muslim Turkish nation, and their descendants would become the Uzbeks in Uzbekistan, the Uyghurs in China, and the Khazaras in Afghanistan. And it just so happens that one of the enemies of the Karakhanids, in an effort to defeat them, ended up making another Turkic tribe Muslim. You see, the Samanids were a Persian tribe that lived nearby, and they were fighting over this land here. And the Samanids, they had been Muslim for a while now, and they were spreading the message of Islam in Central Asia. And it was great that the Karakhanids had become Muslim, but they still had a land dispute from before. The Samanid Sultan Ismail Semeni decided that the best way to solve this dispute was to ally with other Turks in the region. He solidified an alliance with another powerful chieftain by marrying his daughter to him. Ismail quickly became influential over them, and eventually the entire Turkic tribe embraced Islam. They were called the Oghuz Turks, and their descendants would become the Turkmen of Turkmenistan, the Azeris of Azerbaijan, the Qashqai in Iran, and of course the modern Anatolian Turks of Turkey. But that still leaves the biggest Turkic country, Kazakhstan. You see, the Kazakhs were originally called Kipchaks, and they created their own empire just north of the Black Sea. It was a huge empire, and it stretched from Hungary to Mongolia until once again the Mongols showed up and they just got smashed. The Mongols took over their lands and now ruled over the Kipchaks. Subhanallah, wouldn't you know it? These Mongols became Muslim too. This part of the Mongol Empire was called the Golden Horde, and in 1313, Özbeg Khan became its sultan. And then a very similar story to Satuq Bughra Khan, who was that sultan of that first Turkic nation we talked about. Özbeg became Muslim at a young age and waited for his turn to be sultan. Once he rose to power, he immediately began preaching Islam to his people. And soon enough, the entire Golden Horde accepted Islam, both the Mongols and the Turks within it. The Kipchak Turks would later become the Kazakhs of Kazakhstan and the Kyrgyz of Kyrgyzstan, and the Tatars of Russia and Eastern Europe. The Mongols, on the other hand, would go on to mix in with other Turkish nations, which supports the idea that Uzbeks got their name from Özbeg Khan. They may actually be a Turkic-Mongol mix after all. And what's interesting is that these different Turkic and Mongolian tribes went on to build some of the most powerful and longest-lasting empires in Muslim history. The Ottomans, the Seljuks and the Zengids, who Salahuddin was the general under by the way, all came from the Oghuz Turks. The Mamluks and the Khwarezmian and the Nogai horde all came from the Kipchak. And the Muslim Turkic Mongols went on to create the Mughal Empire, the Tughlaq dynasty, and the Crimean Khanate. The Turks have contributed immensely to the Ummah and have spread Islam in lands as far away as Mongolia to Ukraine to India and to Bosnia. Even think about the Lipka Tatars, who are Muslim Turks in Poland, who built the first masjid in New York City. Or think about Kuchum Khan and his army of Turks who spread Islam to the people in the middle of Siberia, while at the same time fighting a war with the Russians. The Turks are a massive group of people with hundreds if not thousands of little tribes and nations scattered across the earth, each with their own language and culture and history, tracing their roots back to a similar origin, and yet somehow they all became Muslim in different ways. And alhamdulillah that they became our brothers in Islam. And if you like this video and find it at all interesting, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe if you want more videos about Muslim history and culture from around the world.
Why did the Soviet Union collapse? For a total of 69 years, Soviet Union and its allies were the most dominant powers in Europe, and for a long time it was even on par with the US. So why did it collapse? The first reason is that Soviet Union was composed of 15 different republics with extremely different cultures, languages, and history from Russia. This is the reason why they weren't fond of being under the rule of a country that was ruled by Russians. The second reason was its failing economy. During the 1990s, its economy was in really bad shape, so it was not able to feed its people while also spending huge amount of money on its military. The final nail in the coffin were the reforms made by its last leader, Mikhail Gorbachev. Why is Eastern Europe still poorer than the West? The average per capita GDP of Eastern European countries is at around $14,000, which is extremely small when compared to the average of Western Europe's $68,000. Not only that, but all the top 10 poorest countries in Europe are also located in the East. So why is the East so poor compared to the West? The first reason is that Eastern Europe is a lot less politically stable than the Western countries. Almost all Balkan countries straight up hate each other, and the tensions with Russia also cause instability in this region. Eastern Europe also has less access to ocean trade routes compared to the West. The third reason is its history of being a part of the Soviet Union and communism.